Hi everyone, Adam here, and welcome back to Adam and John's rigging chat. We're going to talk to John about his journey into rigging in Toon Boom Harmony and see where he's up to after the last episode. So hi John, how's it going?
Hi Adam, it's great to be back, first of all. I've made some alterations to the rig from the last episode that we had, and I've got a lot of fun things to show you, some slider controls. I've changed some of the deformers, and hopefully soon we can get some animation from this. But before we get to that stage, there's a few problems with it still, as you can imagine. Hopefully we can troubleshoot some of those problems today, and yeah, we'll get right into it, shall we?
Brilliant. Let's get stuck in. So from what I can see so far, there's a couple of sliders in there, some interpolation sliders. There's a nice README little essay written out there. So it's looking a little bit more constructed. I can see the timeline has got some keys in it, some scene markers. So do you want to talk me through what's changed since the last version in episode 1?
Certainly. First things first, you probably noticed there's some colored markers in the timeline. This one I've put in capital letters, do not touch. Now, the reason I've put this here is because when you rig a character's poses, you'll keyframe the poses for the turnaround, and these will be used by, say, such things as sliders or master controllers, and these will be used by the software, and you just basically mustn't. I am so useless at explaining it.
No, I think you're doing good. I think it's actually quite good to chat about it. So I think basically what you're trying to say is that you've got a range of frames that are going to be used as your sort of master range for when you're editing anything. So say frames 1 to 25 are dealing with a certain slider like the turnaround, and you want to keep those locked off. So you don't want somebody to edit that. Is that about right?
Yeah, you pretty much summarized it. So I've set out the marker. So these keyframes along here are the ones that the animator mustn't touch. So when they start animating, they'll start beyond there. And I've even labeled this blue scene marker here as just a little testing, which I'll come on to. For those who want to add scene markers to their thing, so say if I select a frame here, if I right click, I can go on scene markers and then mark current frame or create a scene marker. So you can create one and then give it a name like, I don't know, scene 1. You can set the time, so that'll be the frame, so it's on frame 110, and then duration. So say if you want to go for 5 frames, and then choose a color, I'll choose orange. Okay, and then there we go. You have a scene marker for 5 frames in orange. Just they're quite handy. And then you can simply also delete the scene markers. So that's a fun tool that I've found. I've also utilized the backdrops and some of the note nodes. So if you press enter, you can enter in notes here, and then you've got this handy little note thing. I've opened these ones up with this little arrow that appears, so they're a bit easier to clear, and it's just less for you have to click on, and that's where I've mentioned about the markers in the instructions. I'll come on to this section here later because these are all the problems I found with the rig. Okay. So I'll touch on that a bit later. Let's open it up from now on. So first of all.
Wow.
I've color coordinates. Sorry if this is quite intimidating for any newcomers. I do apologize. I'll try to break it down as much as possible, but I've tried to color coordinate things. So for example, both legs are green, you've got the body's orange, head red, and then for the controlling pegs up here, you've got, say, the head and face here, and that's just easier to control. Now, if I select the peg and then show the selected deformers, you can see this range of deformers that I've put on it. So there's quite a few. There's a few on the arms, a few on the legs, the head. And with each deformer, I have keyframed a position. So this is the left, and then he slowly rotates around as such. If I take off the deformers, you'll be able to see it a bit better. So these are just simple keyframes I've done. His head goes a bit weird when it gets to the middle because the way his head works, it creates this sort of like hourglass shape.
Yeah, I think you've done that's a good in-between. I like that. I think that's nice.
What I've added is a few not master controllers, but the slider wizard. So I've done a little test here where you can keyframe it, and what his body will do is it will slowly rotate around. It's almost a 180 degree turn here. But you can probably see there's a few issues. So for example, his shoes and his hats, I think the term is interpolates.
Yeah.
You can see it goes a bit flat. So on this middle frame, it actually disappears. Same with the shoes down here. So that's one of the few problems you get with sliders. And I've done this very brief, not so much an animation test. But what I've done is I've tried to break the rig effectively, because that's a good way to determine when you'll have problems. So if I loop this, you can see he sort of has this little almost I don't know if seizure is the appropriate but
I think that's like a dance, that's pretty cool.
Yes, yeah, he has this sort of boogie. His eyes do this sort of shifty movement here. And surprisingly enough, he hasn't actually broke that much. I mean, obviously you've got the issue with the shoes and the hat, but other than that, it seems to be getting somewhere. So I'm kind of yabbering on a bit.
No, go for it.
What these sliders have allowed me to do is to rotate the head in real time. And then you can see in this timeline, you set this this keyframe here, and then you can add the motion tweens and whatnot. The hat's been done slightly different because I've tried to reduce the interpolation, however you say it. But there's still, again, there's a few bugs, a few kinks, and same with the body here. So I've tried to make it so this arm goes in front and then slowly behind, and somewhat similar with the legs here.
Nice. It's looking pretty good.
A few small minute issues, but the aim of this is to effectively sliders, master controllers, is to make the animation process a little more user friendly. So say we want him to look this way, we'll have him look to the right, and then you've still got the use of deformers to say, I don't know, you want to move his arm. I've also used what's it called? A point kinematic output.
Yeah,
I remember last time we had a problem with the patches. So now the patch actually isn't determined by this pivot point on the arm. So there's a bit more control.
Very nice.
The arms also overlap over the jacket, and I got some feedback from the lovely Dan Keeble. He gave me some feedback regarding the design and how to keep to the original design. So what we've got here, for example, my previous version had an outline on the arms and legs. Now there's only an outline when the arm overlaps the jacket. So I've tried to recreate. It's a bit finicky. You can see the line is a bit tatty here. But if I move the arm, the line follows it and then disappears when it's off the jacket. Yeah, I honestly I can't explain how I've done this, because it's kind of almost a spaghetti mess in the node view here. Somewhere along here I've wired it up correctly, and it's just worked. Yeah, I've tried to do the same with the shorts as well. You can see with this little example, there's these lines here, but in the original design, again, there's no outline. This is quite an issue for any character design, because usually they'll have a nice outline to determine where each limb is. So if I use this leg, for example, now actually this is behind. If I use Alt and up and down arrows, you can see the leg moves over this, and you can see its outline, and then you can simply voila. So there we go. We've already got him doing a jazzy position, and I'll leave it to Adam now to have a little poke around and see if he can fix any problems with this rig, hopefully.
Yeah, okay. I think it's looking really nice. I think you've done a great job so far. There's a few things that might be worth explaining. So from your screen share that you've got going right now, the main thing I want to touch on is that red section at the start of your scene. What will happen is when this rig is complete, you will kind of package it ready for an animator to use. So sometimes that goes into the library. That's often how it's distributed. But what you are working in now is what probably most places, studios and that would call like the master file for the rig, which has those sections where this is when the character's just turning around, these are the tween parts, this is where the head's moving, and all that information that you put onto the timeline to then package into those master controllers, because all a master controller is a script that interprets poses. Yeah, so you need those poses on the timeline. Now, you wouldn't probably ever give an animator, unless it was a very quick turnaround project, you probably wouldn't give them something and say to them, don't work on the first 25 frames. You would probably just have this master file, and then you would just package everything. Like, if you want them to work from frame 30, you would package that into the master controllers, and that thing would go in the library, and then those poses would come back from using the sliders or whatever. So it will be just another step that we'll do to tidy it up, and we'll do that probably in a later video when you get close to packaging it together. But you're working in the working file now, before it hits, like, it's like in beta testing. It's not quite ready for the full version. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, in your master controller, the sliders, did you find the function to remove the interpolation, basically the tweening?
Yes. So if I select the slide wizard, it will come up with a new little window here. I've set it from the frame 8 to frame 13. So there's actually 6 poses, but it counts it from 8. So it would be 8, 9, 10, and then blah, blah, blah. So if I set 8 and 13 here, that's the poses that I've selected. That's these 6 down here.
Just to jump in, you've also got the thing on the left-hand side where we've got the node count. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. So you carry on.
I was actually going to come on to that. Yes, I've selected the frame. So first frame is 8, last frame is 13. Once I've selected this, now you add your selected nodes. Only 24. That can't be right.
So the thing is that it depends on what you've got selected. So if you click that group where it says Frank Rig below the peg, and you were to add those, boom.
There we go. Right, that makes more sense. Right, I had the peg selected, not the group. So that's a good lesson to remember. Select your group, not your peg. Now we can see it's got an attribute count of 789. Now that's quite a big number, and that's going to be quite software heavy. So what a neat trick you can do to improve efficiency is select this little filter button. Is filter attributes. Now this basically just, it uses everything that it needs to use. Say maybe, I don't know, maybe one of the legs didn't move or rotate. It will basically get rid of that because it's not essential for the slider. So if I click this, boom, 272. So that's almost a quarter, or almost a quarter of the other node. So that just helps your performance. And I'll do a little name. So let's name it full body MC. There we go.
That's, by the way, John, that is a neat trick that you have found for so early on using master controller sliders. That's like my wizard rabbit hat sort of situation, like magician rabbit hat. Hardly anybody knows about it, but I love that you found it. So.
Everyone likes to jump to the grid wizard, where you can say if you've got a face, you can make it look top left and then top right. But if there's just a rotation in one axis, then the slide wizard seems to work pretty well. So I've named it full body MC. If I click create, now you'll get this option here to attach. This is basically, you choose where you want this to be attached to. So for example, my master controllers, they're attached to this last input down here, just called input. Now, it's not too much of a massive issue where you put it, because you can just move it around. So let's say I set it to, usually I would set it to the input here, but let's say I accidentally set it to, I don't know, the composite 9 here, or comp 9. You select OK. It will open up this little window, and you'll see it actually creates physical folders in your Toon Boom files. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this one here. So if I click save, there we go. Now, it looks like nothing's happened, but I assure you something has happened. You don't need to create it again because it's already made it. You just have to find it, really. So I accidentally put it under comp 9. So it's going to be located somewhere here.
Shall I give you a cool little searching tip? I know you've found it now, but in that black search bar at the bottom of the node view, if you start to type comp, you see the little magnifying glass bottom right?
Oh, yeah.
Start typing comp_9 and then just hit return. And then just zoom in with your mouse and it'll center it.
Wow. Awesome.
So that if all your master controllers are named _MC, you can type _MC and press return, and then use the arrows to the right of that to go through all the master controllers.
I've actually never seen or used this search.
It's useful when your node view gets super complicated with everything. It's awesome.
I was going to say I could search for it, or once you close the application, it will automatically select it. So you can just press O and then zoom in, kind of similar like we can do in the timeline or in the workspace view. So here's the master controller. Now it'll automatically create this sort of little bar here in the middle. So we don't really want this here. This is in a very awkward place. I'm gonna use the cutter tool here, get rid of this, and it will still show. Now that I don't know why it does that, but that just happens.
So whilst you're dragging that down, that tool you use there, that cable cutter, that's new for Harmony 20. So if anybody's using anything earlier than 20, that won't exist. You can also just grab the tangent like line and pull it off, but obviously the cable cutter is good if you've got multiple cables. And the reason why the master controller slider still shows when it's disconnected is because it's a script, so it's showing a visual thing. But if you were to hide them all and then, like it basically needs to be connected to a composite to go with the character, like everything. So yeah, when you connect that thing back up, it's going to allow the software to not freak out when you save the rig.
Glad there's an answer for that. So for the master controller, now it's a bit annoying it being in the middle here. So what is quite nice, just give it a little peg and then you can move it around. We'll turn it on animate off because we don't want these to be moving around everywhere. Let's move this here. So now we've got this master controller. Now if I move the slider, you can see he hasn't interpolated for some reason.
So one of the things you'll need to be aware of is that you picked 4, 5, or 6, whatever it is, 7 frames quite close together. I don't know if you turned on interpolation or not, but as you was talking about earlier on, interpolate basically means it will tween from key to key, even if there's no tween between it on the timeline. I just want to cover something just whilst we're on the topic. When you went to use the slider and the character was kind of in a funny pose and sort of tweened around, when you use that filter, what that thing does is it basically says, like you explained, it takes where there's information on the keys and it says, okay, things are changing here. Now, you can use your turnaround, your slider to turn the character around. You can have it that way. So it only just turns the larger, sort of the larger areas, the larger pegs. So if something's moving and there's children, other pegs below it. So if this one's moving along and this one's the parent and the one below is the child, it will only focus on the parent if that's the one with key information on. But sometimes when you've got one of those turnarounds, what you want is you want it kind of sometimes to reset the pose. So depending on the setup, you might want it as a reset, in which case you don't want to use the filter. You want it to include all the nodes. So when we clicked on that group and it put in 700 things, that means, you can actually go in and select individual nodes and remove them from that stack. But that will mean it will reset it. So if the character is in a weird pose and then you use the slider, it will reset it. So you can have like a reset slider and you can have one that just turns the upper body, lower body, whatever.
That's interesting because that was actually one of the problems I had with the rig.
They're complicated to understand, aren't they? When you start to unpick them, you're like, oh, where was I with this thing?
Let's let Adam have a little play around with the rig and we'll see what he can see, because I've probably done a bit of a poor job of explaining a lot of these things.
No, I think it's good. I think that it's probably getting lost in translation a little bit. So let me take a deeper dive. Okay, so here's Jonathan's rig. And here we go from previous to more on model version, which is cool to see. So as we were talking about sliders, and we were just talking about how to add all the different nodes to being influenced by when you use the slider, because all these things do are they're scripts that say, look at the keyframe information for this node. So it can look at the keyframe information for all the nodes, or it can look at the keyframe information for just a few of them, which is how you can have something that turns the face but doesn't change the mouth shapes. If we have the mouth shapes and all the pegs and everything, the drawings associated with those mouth shapes, they're not included in the slider or what the script looks at, but instead it looks at everything else around it. So for example, it might look at this peg, so we can move this around, but it wouldn't affect this peg, sort of thing. So that's how people have those special looking master controller rigs where you can kind of change the mouth or the expression of the eyes or whatever, and it will keep it as it rotates around. It's just extra pegs on top which are being influenced and the ones below which aren't. So in terms of the rig itself, I think this is looking really nice. The main thing that I wanted discuss, seeing as we're talking mainly about master controllers, and I think people will be interested for this, is like we said about the interpolation sliders, the very mouthy, wordy way of calling these things. So how you've got them sort of popping through there, I would say for a rig like this, where especially like the hat, where it's quite stylized, you probably want them to pop rather than tween. I would say a lot of the time it's quite useful to have a character go through the different angles, but for it to jump into these what we would call on model poses rather than tween through lots of positions, which an animation director is going to say, yeah, but that pose doesn't look like the character, so you're going to have to tweak it anyway. Okay, so really the script, the master controller script, is just like poses saved into the library that are going to help you get to your animation quicker. So you only want stuff, really, for me, in a good rig, you only want stuff that's going to be saving you time, not creating more work for you, because you've got to tweak everything. In terms of everything else that's going on here, I think the main other thing I just wanted to talk about was that interpolation of things. So if we were to make a rig out of this, out of these two things, and we were to make a slider, when you do that, and we've got frame 8 to 13, so we've got all our nodes in here, you can do that thing where it's like you can remove it, start again, delete this, and then you can just select the stuff and choose add the selected nodes. You don't even need to select the top peg, you can just select the group, and then obviously if you've moved the peg around, it will correctly pose it rather than jumping it back to the default pose. You know what I mean? So if the character's running, it will pose wherever it is on screen. So depending on the setup that you have for how you're going to work, that's the kind of thing that a rigger really needs to work with the production team, or, you know, kind of establish the brief for how the animators are going to work with the rig. Sort of like what you were talking about with your notes in the node view, which is a very handy way. But I always think it's quite nice to give animators to be given by a rigger like a one page when the rig is finished. It's like a one page that you can print off and stick by your computer. So interpolate between poses, this, even though they're frame by frame by frame, if I was to have that turned on, because I think you had that turned off, which is why it didn't tween.
I might have been, yeah. That'll explain a few things.
Yeah, if you have that turned on, even though that's just a key and there's no tweening between these keys on the timeline, it will still create a tween, okay? Just how you were talking about. So I'm just going to click cancel because there's no point doing that. And yeah, in terms of the feet, I would generally just pose them out like you have, the flipping of the elements, just like you have with the hat. I think that's a really good solution. The same, what we maybe will talk about is the thing where it tweens over a point. If you take off that interpolate with poses, you're going to have it flip, which is really nice. I just wanted to talk about one other tiny little thing. I'm just going to click on that and press O to jump to it. Maybe we can talk about how to not have elements flip in a master controller grid wizard, you know, the 360 head thing that people do. We can talk about that in the next video or another video, because that's a little bit more involved, but there is a way to do it. I just want to go into the settings of this master controller here for the hat, just to show you something. So just in case you aren't aware, you have the option of, I think you discussed this in your note.
I set them to always, so whenever you open the project file, they'll always be there. You can change that to, there should be two other options, onload and another one.
Onload and normal, yeah. So I'm not sure if that's showing on screen, but you've got your invert horizontal options there. You've got your label, so MC hat, you can MC hammer, MC hat, whatever. Old person's joke there. Even change the font. But you can change the color of the slider here, there. And you can also, if you want to remove this, change the dynamic label, you can do. If you remove where it says MC hat, it will just have a blank there. So you can change loads of stuff in here. I think it's pretty handy to know where those elements are. I never go into any of these bits because I don't understand enough about it. But
yeah, they're too complex for me to understand.
Yeah, but the main thing is, like you were saying, you need to make sure that a master controller is connected, ideally to a composite, because then it will work better with your scene. It's a little bit involved about how that works, but yeah, you need to have them connected up. Otherwise, I would say great job on this so far. Just a small few tweaks, but I think you've done a really nice job of putting this into a rotation
Thank you.
and doing this kind of like a line show over the, when it overlaps like that. I think that is really cool. And the way how you've done it is with a cutter showing, when it overlaps the fill of the body, it shows this outline.
Just a quick question before we wrap it up. So this Frankenstein rig is more of a personal project rather than like working with a studio and having deadlines. When do you determine when a rig is ready to be animated? Because I feel like a lot of riggers, especially newcomers, they have this conundrum of they don't know when to finish a rig effectively. Like there's you can always just keep adding and adding and adding and keep adding to the point where it becomes either too complicated or too comprehensive.
That's a good question. I think in a project you normally determine by a deadline. You've got 3 weeks until this has got to be ready. The thing with a rigging job, and as a rigger, your job is to make it suitable for animation. So if you're an animator, that helps a little bit because you know what you're looking for. But as a rigger, you're going to understand a bit about animation anyway, because that's part of your job. So a rig is finished when you can make it do the things that you need to for animation. Now, a rig is never going to do everything you need, and that's why you'll do iterations and new versions. Productions very rarely stay on like version 1 of a rig. They'll always update and change slightly as animators find more things they want in it or problems with it. But a rigger will basically look at maybe some poses or the things, in the brief that it needs to do. Like, how does the mouth need to be? How does the body need to move? What are the requirements of the rig that I'm building here, and what does it need to do? Then, depending on the size of the project, like if it's a personal project, you could just be like, okay, cool, I'm going to run with this now, see how it goes. I did it for this penguin film I worked on, and I stopped at a certain point and then just added stuff as I needed it because, I was ready to animate with it. Whereas in a studio production, you don't really have that luxury, because if you go, cool, it's ready to go, and then you put it out there and it's got loads of problems with it, every animation that's been done up to that point might be incompatible with your new version. So it might take up production time and the producer might be a bit mad at you. So you have to find that kind of happy medium between time spent on the rig and ready for animating.
Yeah, I'm having that problem right now because I got to a stage where I'm quite happy with the rig. You've got the deformers, it's got a lot of flexibility. But when it comes to animating, like having to move, say, the jacket, the t-shirt, the neck, the head, having to manually move each section becomes a bit tedious. So by the use of sliders, you can have, I can rotate the whole body in just one sort of like click. So it's now getting to the stage of how many sliders do I add? How far do I push this? And really, like, does it need all this? it's quite a hard topic because it's hard to know where to draw the line, these sort of things. So
yeah,
it's getting close to being able to be animated, but it's just knowing when do I cross that bridge, really.
Yeah, and that's when you, even as a rigger, you do a little pose test and go, how's it going? What can I do with this? What do I need? That is a massive way of saving time and knowing when to cut it off, even though it feels like it might be a waste of time, to just go, right, I'm going to try and do a little animation test, half an hour, see what I can do. And that's why I always recommend for people to get into rigging in Toon Boom, you need to also know a little bit about animation, because you don't rig in isolation. You kind of rig within the production team. And yeah, you move on from there. But I think, yeah, you're getting close with it. So it's getting there.
Hi guys, thank you to those who have kept watching up until now. It's been quite a while since we uploaded our first episode. Yeah, sorry about that. However, since then a lot has happened, as I'm currently working as a rig artist in Finland. I'm also recording this outro in the present for a video in the past, even though we've already recorded the video after this. Did that make sense? Anyway, when we release episode 3, it'll be more of a podcast style conversation where we discuss how I got into the industry and what I've learned so far. Plus, Adam and I have a ton of animation related content ideas for the future. We're aiming to stick to a schedule where we can create videos more frequently, so be sure to stick around. But until then, I'll see you next time.